Over the past few years, I've played a ton of fantastic games on my PS5, and as someone who had never owned a PlayStation console before, it's allowed me to enjoy so many great experiences from both the past and present. Nintendo has and probably always will be my primary focus, but there are a lot of terrific games that aren't available on Switch that I haven't really had the chance to talk about before. So I decided to cover all of them at once by reviewing every single game I own on my PS5. When I did this in the past for my Wii U and Switch libraries, I only reviewed my physical games. But on PlayStation, I'm a lot less stingy when it comes to collecting to try and keep myself sane, which means I buy way more digital games when they go on sale. So this time I'll be including both physical and digital games, bringing the total amount to around 46 at the moment. I'll be keeping my thoughts on each game extremely brief to keep things moving, paired with some gameplay I captured for all of them which took way too much time to do. They'll also be in a totally random order, as there's no way I'm going to go through the mental challenge of trying to rank all of these from worst to best. I want to warn you that there are quite a few games here that I haven't beaten or even played that much, so some of these reviews will be based on just a few hours of playtime. I still intend on beating most of those games, but waiting until I've actually done that would delay this video indefinitely. And of course, these are just my opinions that are ever changing and evolving, and I'm sure I'm missing tons of great games like Yakuza, Ghost of Tsushima, or most importantly, Ape Escape. Now let's not waste any more time and get right into it. Uncharted 4 is a near-perfect final send-off for the series, as well as being a fantastic action-adventure game on its own. It's hard to believe that it's almost a decade old, as it still looks and feels incredible. The impressive combination of cinematics and gameplay is unmatched, providing some super memorable set pieces and the best Uncharted story by far. It feels like you're controlling a movie in the best way possible, making it one of the very best big-budget AAA experiences out there. Gravity Rush 2 is such a great sequel to the first game, bringing its ridiculously fun and unique gameplay to a more powerful console with gorgeous visuals and a phenomenal soundtrack. While the gravity shifting mechanics take some getting used to and can be a bit clunky at times, the power fantasy of being able to fly through the air in any direction is one of the best in all of gaming. It might not be a perfectly polished and smooth experience, but its inventive gameplay and captivating world make it one of my personal favorites. Persona 3 Reload completely took over my life for a few months when it was released, quickly making it my most played PS5 game by far. There was a solid stretch of time when I thought it was my favorite in the whole series, as its impactful story, smooth gameplay, and terrific soundtrack had me completely immersed in the satisfying loop of dungeon crawling and socializing. I know there are a lot of people that feel this remake took a lot of the edge and personality out of Persona 3, so I definitely want to go back and play the original someday as well. But I still absolutely loved my time with this game. Kena Bridge of Spirits is one of the best looking games I've ever played, as it genuinely looks like an animated movie with its top tier animations and environments. The gameplay does feel a bit stiff and restricted a lot of the time, and I was hoping for a bit more from the story and characters. But as the debut game from such a small studio, I think it's pretty amazing what they managed to pull off here. This was one of my favorite games of 2021, and I can't wait to see what they do with the sequel later this year. Spider-Man 2 is sort of an interesting game, as in a lot of ways it's a big improvement over the original. The world is expanded to be a lot larger, the new wingsuit is a ton of fun to combine with the regular swinging, and it's a very visually impressive next-gen experience. But in terms of the story and overall atmosphere of the city, it left a much smaller impact on me. Maybe it's because this was the third Spider-Man game I played on my PS5, so that initial magic had sort of worn off by this point. But this is still a really solid superhero game that I enjoyed a lot. Astro's Playroom is a super fun 3D platforming tour of your shiny new PS5 console since it comes pre-installed on every system, and I think everyone should play through it at least once to feel the pure joy that this little robot can give you. It's a genuinely great showcase for what the DualSense is capable of. And while it is pretty simple and short, it's still a solid collectathon that highlights PlayStation's history of consoles. And it helped to further lay the groundwork for what would eventually become one of the best games on the system. Monster Hunter World is the game that really started my deep dive into the series, as for whatever reason this is the one where everything finally started clicking into place. I stayed up late completing dozens of difficult but rewarding hunts to build better gear, with each new monster I faced being a fun new test of my skills. The base game was very enjoyable, but it was the Iceborne DLC that truly changed my brain chemistry forever. The mix of challenging quests with a relaxing hub world and satisfying crafting systems makes this one of my favorite games on the whole console. I just recently beat Bloodborne, which was the first time I really vibed with a Souls-like game on a deeper level. I did play Elden Ring when it came out, but this game's more focused and aggressive gameplay style resonated with me even more. The gothic, Lovecraftian horror atmosphere is incredible, and the punishing gameplay matches it so perfectly. I really enjoyed its more linear structure and hub system, and the DLC has some of the best content in the whole game. I'm suddenly eager to play the rest of From Software's lineup, although I think it'll be tough to top this one for me. I bought Street Fighter 6 on a whim after loving the demo. and despite my complete lack of experience with fighting games, I had a great time with this one. This game has some super positive and upbeat energy with fast-paced action and plenty of colorful characters, as well as a decently fun single-player story that taught me the basics of the fighting system. My refusal to ever pay for PlayStation Plus means that I didn't put too many hours into this game once I beat the World Tour mode, but I'll still play an offline match as my man can every now and then. Shadow of the Colossus has an awe-inspiring sense of scale, and slaying these larger-than-life beings feels equally epic and sombering. At its best, there's truly nothing else like it, but there's just enough janky moments and annoying control hiccups that keep it from being absolutely perfect for me. But its stunning art direction and sweeping musical score kept me pushing through the frustration, and I respect its complete and total focus on executing one specific artistic vision. And this is a great remake by Bluepoint Games that delivers an impressive graphical overhaul. Spider-Man still has the most memorable story and set pieces when compared to its follow-ups, with web-swinging gameplay that's just as much fun to control as you'd hope it would be. While many of the objectives in the open world are somewhat repetitive, the core movement system is so enjoyable that I didn't even care. The combat is quick and snappy, rewarding fast reactions and constant dodging, which fits Spider-Man perfectly. Even though the PS5 remaster was the first version I played, I still prefer the old style of Peter's face since I watched all the cutscenes on YouTube back when a PS4 seemed forever out of reach. Resident Evil 4 Remake is an amazing reimagining of the original, making it look and play more like a modern game without totally losing the charm of the 2005 version. The more action-focused style of this game keeps the energy high while still being plenty scary, and Leon's cheesy lines of dialogue never get old. Stringing together a long chain of headshots and roundhouse kicks is so much fun, and the resource management systems keep you on your toes. While I don't think this game completely replaces the original, it is a pretty great companion. Uncharted: The Nathan Drake Collection is the best way to play through the first 3 games in the series. Both 2 and 3 are really great and definitely worth experiencing, and the first game is also there. The older style of graphics and less realistic gameplay moments have their own unique charm, as there are so many fun, larger-than-life sequences that would have been tough to pull off with the heightened realism of the 4th game. I played through all of these games in rapid succession, and it was some of the most fun I had on my PS5. I've only played about an hour or 2 of Subnautica, mostly because I apparently have a pretty large fear of swimming around in the open ocean, which I wasn't aware of until playing this game. I also have to be in the right mood to play these kinds of heavily survival-focused games, and I've just never clicked with this one. The water graphics and creature designs are pretty great from what I've seen so far, and I'm sure I could find plenty to enjoy here if I gave it some more time and energy. God of War is a heavy-hitting mythological journey with an engaging story and seamless gameplay, taking the franchise in a totally new direction that feels more cinematic and grounded. Or at least I think so, as this is the only God of War game I've played. The dialogue and writing is great, which is important since there's almost always someone talking as you travel around this gorgeous world. I remember getting a little tired of the combat and slow pace by the end of the game, but this is still a really impressive game in so many ways. I still need to play Ragnarok as I've heard that one might be even better. Final Fantasy XVI is one of those games that I kind of enjoy looking back on more than actually playing, as the pacing and strict linearity can get old pretty quickly. But this game's high points are truly incredible, with some of the most grand and exciting boss fights that I've ever battled against. This was the first Final Fantasy game I played, which is kind of ironic since it doesn't play like a classic turn-based RPG at all due to its real-time action-focused combat. I might not be planning on replaying it anytime soon, but overall I still think this game was worth playing to witness the peaks of what it's capable of. I bought Dreams on sale for less than $10 for the sole purpose of playing an Avatar: The Last Airbender fan game I had seen on YouTube, which honestly was totally worth it. Getting to fly around the sky as Aang with an air glider made me very happy, and I'll still boot it up every now and then to see how the project is going. I'm sure the set of creation tools that Dreams offers is really impressive, but my other favorite part of this game is playing really bad fan-made Mario and Sonic games as I find that extremely entertaining. While Wild Hearts doesn't reach the same heights as Monster Hunter, it's still a lot of fun to play another game in this style that feels entirely fresh with totally unique mechanics and monsters. Healthy competition is good for everyone, and this is a great example of how this hunting formula can still be full of experimentation and new ideas. It's a bit rough around the edges in a lot of ways, from performance to the often muddy visuals. But I've still enjoyed what I've played so far, and it's a shame that it seems to have already been abandoned by EA. It's also worth mentioning that I got this game for like $15, which is probably why I'm so forgiving towards it. Sea of Thieves is the ultimate pirate simulator that has allowed me to connect with the deep part of my soul that longs to sail the high seas in search of treasure. I played this game for more than 50 hours on Xbox thanks to Game Pass, and only recently bought it on sale on PlayStation once I learned that you could now play it without an online subscription. Most of my time was spent playing alone anyways, as simply getting from one island to another and exploring along the way is more than enough to keep me entertained for a long time. I'll never forget the first time my ship was attacked by a kraken. I haven't played much of Final Fantasy VII Remake yet, as before starting it I decided to play through the entirety of the 1997 original, which meant I kind of needed a break from this world before diving into it all over again from the start. From the small amount that I have played, it's a very solid modernization of all these classic characters and locations. However, like most remakes, I don't think it should be treated as a full replacement, as there is a sort of magic to the original that gets lost along the way. Especially with the soundtrack, as that's the change that I missed the most in the opening hours. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 takes a lot of the best elements from the turn-based RPG genre and throws it all together into one giant, beautiful game about mortality and the dangers of escapism. It took me a while to start really connecting with this game, but once I did, it easily became one of my favorite games of last year. The narrative builds up to some mind-bending revelations in the final act, which have me already wanting to play through it again. This game winning so many awards totally makes sense to me, and I can't wait to see what Sandfall Interactive will do next. Sayonara Wild Hearts is a fantastically brief and condensed musical ride through a constant barrage of creativity and beautiful visuals, with a soundtrack that I've listened to on repeat since I first played it. Nothing beats the feeling of frantically dodging obstacles while a banger song motivates you to go even faster, and there's a ton of replayability here since the levels are so short and satisfying to memorize. And on PS5 it runs at a full 4K 120 FPS, making this the best way to play one of the finest indie games of the past decade. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is an extremely fun and varied showcase of just how good PS5 games can look and play, with some very solid combat and platforming thrown in there too. While I have yet to finish this one, it's already much more enjoyable than the 2016 reboot thanks to its higher level of polish and more interesting locations. The dialogue and story can be a bit cheesy and overly kid-friendly at times, but overall this is a great game that I'm excited to play more of. Elden Ring is staggering in terms of scale and content, with every corner of this massive world feeling handcrafted and full of hidden lore. The boss fights are unsurprisingly brutal, especially so for me on my first playthrough since I'd never played a Souls-like before. This game is an incredible mix of open world design and more linear dungeons, even though there are a few cases of repeated locations and bosses. I really want to replay this game soon, as I think I would appreciate everything it's doing a lot more now compared to when I first played it back in 2022. Sifu is yet another difficult and punishing game that I'm bad at, with a complex hand-to-hand combat system that I still haven't gotten fully comfortable with. I've only made it through the first few stages before dying too many times to continue, but in those brief moments where I actually managed to do everything right, I feel like the star of the coolest martial arts movie ever. There's such a great sense of impact and power behind every hit, and the stylized visuals look terrific. Maybe with some more training and practice, I can actually make it to the end of this game someday. I'm not a huge fan of Sonic Frontiers, as the janky movement and somewhat uninspired open world design made me eager to get to the end credits so I could move on and play something else. But while I don't think this is a very well made or polished game, I did still manage to have some fun zooming around the landscape and quickly platforming through all the weird stuff floating in the air. Before playing Frontiers, I'd never really clicked with a Sonic game. And yeah, I still haven't because this one really wasn't for me. But I can at least respect the attempt at a more ambitious game. I spent way too much of my time after high school playing Rocket League, although all of those hours were on Switch. There is a unique kind of enjoyment in learning all the ins and outs of an online game like this, and grinding games to try and increase your rank. I became obsessed with building out my garage to have tons of cool cars, decals, and boost styles, which involved actual gambling with real money, so that's not fun. Don't worry though, I was broke, so the most I ever spent on this game was like $20. The gameplay is still a lot of fun, but I've soured on this game over the years, especially with the addition of battle passes and item shops. Spider-Man Miles Morales was the first PS5 game I played, and it was a pretty mind-blowing introduction to next-gen hardware for me since I was used to the power level of the original Nintendo Switch. The holiday theme and winter weather go a long way in making the city feel different, and Miles is a ton of fun to play as thanks to his electric powers and invisibility. The story is pretty simple with a few standout moments, but my main focus was just enjoying swinging around the city since I actually played this one before the original. De Blob 1 and 2 are childhood classics for me that I still love revisiting every now and then, thanks largely to its jazzy soundtrack and vibrant visuals. While I grew up with the Wii versions, these PS4 ports are pretty much the definitive way to play them these days. The loop of bringing color back to each level as the music builds in energy is a lot of fun, and all of the characters are full of personality and charm. While these games might not be the best 3D platformers ever, they're still unique enough to be worth revisiting all these years later. Sword of the Sea is full of beautiful vistas and has a really nice flow to the movement, and while it isn't a very long game, I'm still glad I played it. I understand the criticism that this game feels a bit too similar to Giant Squid's previous games like Journey and Abzu, but since this formula is so high quality and enjoyable, I don't think it's too big of a problem. The platforming mechanics are pretty simple, but it's still very satisfying to string together different moves to keep your momentum up. I can always respect when a game is paced this quickly, as it keeps things from ever getting too repetitive or stale. I've tried to get into Red Dead Redemption 2 a few different times, but I have yet to really connect with it. I think it mostly just comes down to timing and whatever mood I happen to be in, as I can tell there's something here I would love because of its incredible visuals and impressive level of realism. I just haven't clicked with it in the first few hours and always end up dropping it pretty soon after. I think the sheer size and scope of the game mixed with its slow pacing has been what keeps throwing me off, but I definitely still want to give it another try in the future. Gravity Rush blew me away with its core movement system that's truly unlike anything else, making the simple act of getting from one point to the next the best part of the game. Playing a game that's this expressive and distinct reminded me of just how much potential this medium has. The world building and music are top tier as well, although the combat and boss fights can often feel pretty awkward and unintuitive. While you can still tell that this is a PS Vita game, it's honestly held up remarkably well with this PS4 remaster. I don't have too much to say about Ratchet & Clank, as I didn't play it for very long before moving on to something else. While it looks nice and has some solid gameplay, it also feels very safe and has a pretty bland story. I wanted to play through the entire game in preparation for Rift Apart, which did not end up happening. I still want to give this one another shot, but it's not exactly at the top of my backlog at the moment. And if I am in the mood for this series, I'll most likely just stick to the sequel. Resident Evil 2 Remake was one of the first horror games I ever played, and I don't think I'll ever forget the pure terror I felt on my first playthrough. I was 100% locked in and focused on survival, with it always feeling like I had just enough bullets to barely escape whatever horrible situation Leon got himself into. Despite being more than 7 years old, this game still looks fantastic, with a sense of tension and fear running through every moment of the gameplay. For a long time I thought that horror games just weren't for me, but that completely changed after I played this one. Stray is one of the best looking indie games I've played, with a fascinating world full of robots that was a joy to explore. I've seen a decent amount of hate for this game because of its incredibly simple and streamlined gameplay, but I think there's more than enough interesting stuff going on here to make up for the more restricted movement and level of interaction. I was totally immersed in this dark and neon lit world when I first played it, and playing as a cat definitely gives it a few extra bonus points as well. The Last of Us Remastered, not to be confused with The Last of Us or The Last of Us Part 1, is a cinematic journey through a gritty, post-apocalyptic world that became one of the best examples of what AAA games were capable of for a while. While I might personally prefer Uncharted due to its more over-the-top and extravagant action, there's no denying that this game is a huge step up in terms of character development and storytelling. I still need to finish this one so I can play the divisive sequel, but it's clear that this series has become one of the most iconic in all of gaming for good reason. Another Crab's Treasure is a charming indie Souls-like with an obsessive focus on ocean theming and puns, which somehow never got old for me. The different shell types and combat abilities create a strong sense of progression, paired with some solid boss fights that felt great to finally defeat after way too many attempts. This game does not feel like it was made by just a handful of people at all, which is a testament to their hard work and artistry. So if you're a fan of this genre, I can solidly recommend this one despite it having a few rough edges here and there. Horizon Zero Dawn is another one of those big budget games that I've just never gotten fully invested in for whatever reason, but that doesn't mean I don't think it's a good game. This world is beautiful, and hunting robot dinosaurs is just undeniably cool. I think if this had been one of the first open world games I played, I would feel very differently about it. But at the time of this game's release, I was busy putting a ridiculous amount of hours into Breath of the Wild on my Wii U. But believe it or not, I still want to play more of this one, which I know is like the 10th time I've said that in this video. Unbeatable launched in a pretty rough state, with major glitches that halted progression and deleted high scores, so it's tough to give it a pass because of that. However, it also has a terrific art style and soundtrack that were enough to keep me happy all by themselves. This game is a bit too ambitious for its own good, as I think it's really at its best when it just focuses on being a more standard rhythm game and not a full-on narrative-driven experience with exploration sections and constant cutscenes. But despite all of its flaws, I still enjoyed this game for what it is. I have pretty complicated feelings about Monster Hunter Wilds, as it makes a lot of missteps that frustrate me, while also somehow being some of the most fun I've had on this console. Unfortunately, Wilds takes so much of what I love about these games and dilutes it down for the sake of convenience. But it also delivers some of the best monster fights in the series, even if they're less challenging due to the wounding system and the overall increased power level of the hunter. Overall, this is still a great game that's capable of so much excitement and satisfaction. It just isn't quite as solid as many of the past Monster Hunter games. Like a lot of other teenagers in early 2018, Fortnite became a brief obsession for me that had me hooked on unlocking Battle Pass rewards and fighting for that coveted victory royale. I played it the most during Season 4, but it didn't take me too long to lose interest in the Battle Royale formula's endless gameplay loop. There were a solid few months where this game was pretty much all I played on my brother's Xbox One S, and I do still have a certain fondness for those times. but I rarely play it on my PS5 these days since it's mostly the same game but now with a ton of expensive corporate crossover skins. My thoughts on Abzu are pretty similar to Sword of the Sea, being that it's a strikingly beautiful short adventure that shines through its simplicity and fast pacing. This game really highlights the serenity of the ocean, and it's super satisfying to watch all these environments come back to life and be bursting with all kinds of sea creatures and plant life. It's more of a moving painting than a video game at times, as the gameplay is pretty straightforward and doesn't offer much of a challenge. But the stunning visuals are obviously the main draw here. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga might not reach the peaks of the original LEGO Star Wars games on the Wii, but it's still a lot of fun to relive all the iconic moments from the movies I grew up watching in this shiny new way. While this is easily the most polished and large-scale LEGO game yet, it also does lose a lot of the charm of the older style. This game would have completely blown my mind if I'd played it when I was a kid, but as a boring adult it doesn't hit quite the same. But it's still a great game that covers a ton of movies all at once. Marvel Rivals is pretty much just Overwatch with Marvel superheroes, and I quickly realized that this type of online game just isn't for me anymore. It does have an interesting art style and some fun characters to play as, but I'm just not willing to put in the amount of hours required to start playing this game at a high level. While I don't have any huge beef with this game, having to play it again made me question if making this video was really a good idea or not. And last but certainly not least, there's Astro Bot. This game is like a delightful explosion of pure joy, celebrating so many franchises from across PlayStation's history with every level being a standout. Astro's movement is pretty simple, so it's the level design and constant introduction of new mechanics that really takes everything to the next level. This is one of the only PS5 games that makes truly great use of the DualSense controller, with a sense of fun and creativity that easily makes this one of my all-time favorite platformers. And those were my quick thoughts on every PS5 game I own. I always enjoy making videos like this so I can appreciate all of the great games that I've played in the past, and it also forces me to take a hard look at my backlog to really see how much there is for me to play without buying anything new. I'm sure I'll inevitably still keep buying some new PS5 games in the future though, as I am planning on playing Monster Hunter Stories 3 and Resident Evil 9 at some point, and my physical copy of Hi-Fi Rush is already pre-ordered from those annoyingly unreliable limited run folks. And hey, maybe GTA 6 will actually be released at some point too. I had a lot of fun talking about such a wide variety of games, and I hope you enjoyed this one despite it being different from what I normally talk about. Now hopefully I won't have to see another download progress bar for a long while, as getting all of the footage for this video was a terrifying cycle of storage management, copying data, and questioning why Fortnite's file size is more than 100 gigabytes. Aw man, come on, didn't I just update this game?